Have you ever left a job? Or like maybe you know a colleague who recently packed up their desk.
Yeah, handed in their notice and just walked out.
Exactly, and walked
Uh,
out for the last time. And when that inevitable exit interview rolls around or people casually ask you why you're moving on, what's the standard answer?
oh, it's almost always the
Oh,
same.
right. You've probably heard it 100 times, or maybe you even used it yourself. It usually sounds something like, I'm leaving for better pay, or I just really need more flexibility in my schedule right now.
Right. It functions as the classic polite cover story
Yeah.
because it's incredibly neat. It's universally understandable. And, well, crucially, nobody's ever going to argue with someone wanting to improve their financial situation or get a better work-life balance.
No, of course not.
It has become practically a reflex in the modern workforce.
It's the safest possible answer. But what if that safe answer is actually masking a much larger systemic failure? Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to uncover the real reason workers, particularly those operating in really high-stakes environments, are rushing for the exits.
And we have some fascinating source material for this.
We do. We're pulling back the curtain using a highly specific, very dense source document. It's an analysis designed for healthcare leaders, workforce strategists, and system architects within the NHS, which is the UK's National Health Service.
Right.
The analysis is titled NWAF and the Protection Gap. And what we are going to prove today is that in massive organizations, those stated desires for better pay or flexible hours are usually just the visible tip of a massive structural iceberg.
Now, a quick but really important note before we really get into the weeds of this analysis.
Good point.
The reliance on external agencies and, the privatization of certain staffing elements within the UK's National Health Service is a heavily debated, politically charged topic.
Absolutely.
So our goal today is not to take a political stance, endorse a specific healthcare policy, or take sides on how a national health system should be funded. We are strictly here to impartially unpack the psychological and structural insights presented in this specific text.
Right, we're just looking at the data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while the source is laser-focused on healthcare, the dynamics of why people leave, and more importantly, why they choose to stay, those apply to almost any massive organization losing talent to the gig economy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because for the last decade or more, the dominant narrative in huge institutions has been exactly what we just talked about.
Right.
Management looks at the retention data and concludes, well, our staff are drifting toward external agencies and independent consultancies because they want higher pay and they want economy.
Yeah, that's been the unquestioned, accepted truth.
But this analysis comes in and completely dismantles that narrative. It argues that the explanation is just totally incomplete. The truth, according to the text, is structural.
Structural.
Right. Staff leave when they feel unprotected, and they stay when the system protects them.
And the document refers to itself as a governance-grade analysis, which is a crucial distinction.
Okay, how so?
Oh, this isn't like an HR survey asking people about their feelings, and it's definitely not an opinion piece. It's a rigorous audit of legal frameworks, risk distribution, and institutional liability.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So by looking at the data through the lens of governance rather than just human resources, the authors reveal that individual workers aren't just being greedy or demanding.
Right.
They are responding to an organization that is failing to provide a fundamental psychological and structural need.
Let me try out an analogy here, because feeling unprotected can sound a bit abstract.
Sure, go for it.
Imagine you're deciding whether to own a car or just use a rental car service. Owning the car represents being a full-time staff member. It's reliable, but it comes with rigid responsibilities, maintenance, fixed costs. You have to park it in the same spot every day.
Right, you're tied to it.
Exactly. Then you look at the rental service, which represents the agency. It feels incredibly freeing. You just pick up a car when you want to drive, drop it off when you don't, and you get to drive different models.
And people assume you switch to the rental because you love the variety and the freedom.
But the reality, you only switched to the rental because the car you owned kept breaking down on the highway in the middle of the night, and the dealership just refused to send a tow truck.
Ah, that's a great way to put it.
You didn't necessarily crave the freedom. You were just terrified of being stranded alone. You wanted basic protection.
That captures the core mechanism perfectly. Because when we examine the psychology of staying, the source goes into really granular detail about risk.
Right.
Most staff do not leave because they suddenly dislike their core mission or their dedication to healthcare. They leave because they feel entirely exposed.
Exposed how? Like
Yeah.
legally?
Legally, professionally, all of it.
Yeah.
Imagine being in a high-stakes medical scenario, like a chaotic emergency department, for example. An incident occurs, a split-second mistake happens, or an outcome is just tragically poor.
Which happens in healthcare.
It does.
Yeah.
And if you are operating in a system where you feel uncertain about your legal rights, or you're unsure who is actually going to stand behind you when the inquiry begins,
Oh, wow.
yeah, that vulnerability is absolutely terrifying.
So you're standing on the highway in the dark, and you realize the manufacturer is not sending that tow truck.
Exactly. And that realization is the catalyst. It's not about the hourly rate. It's about the sudden chilling awareness that when things get difficult, you're standing entirely on your own.
So, if feeling exposed and vulnerable is the primary trigger, how does it actually play out in real time? Like, how does a dedicated long-term worker transform into someone handing their notice to go work for a gig agency?
The source actually outlines a very predictable pipeline for this.
Right. But instead of just listing out a bunch of steps, let's look at how this cascading failure actually happens on the ground. It begins with the system stretching beyond its capacity.
Yes.
The workload spikes and the staff become overwhelmed.
Which is an almost universal experience in any high-demand system today.
Yeah.
But being overwhelmed is just the catalyst.
Right.
Because they're overwhelmed, the workers begin to look around for the support structures that are supposed to catch them. And when those structures are missing or inadequate, the feeling of being overwhelmed curdles into a feeling of being actively unsupported.
That is where the institutional faith starts to erode. They lose trust in the internal processes of the organization.
Completely.
The reporting systems, the management hierarchy, the wellness programs, they all start to look like hollow corporate theater.
Yeah. And once that trust fractures,
Yeah.
the worker enters a state of active scanning. They start looking for a pressure valve.
A way to escape the immediate danger of the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And right on cue, the external agencies appear on the horizon, offering a seemingly perfect lifeline. They step into that void of trust and offer a highly compelling alternative.
They offer the ability to step away from the crushing institutional weight.
Yes, they do.
Wait, I have to offer a little pushback here on how the text frames this.
Okay.
The analysis says agencies appear to offer relief, but don't they actually provide genuine, tangible relief?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if I'm a nurse drowning on a ward working mandatory overtime and an agency says, hey, you can work Tuesdays and Thursdays only and we'll pay you double the hourly rate.
Right.
That sounds like a literal lifesaver. Getting to pick your own hours sounds like actual relief, not just the appearance of it.
It is a tremendously tempting proposition.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why the pipeline is so effective at draining talent from the NHS.
Yeah.
But the source material is very careful to draw a hard line here. And it is the most crucial distinction in the entire document.
Okay, what is it?
Agencies sell autonomy. They sell the illusion of total control over your schedule. But autonomy is not the same thing as safety.
Oh.
And this distinction introduces the central thesis of the analysis, the protection gap.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's break down this protection gap because this is where the text gets incredibly specific.
It really does.
The NHS fundamentally is built on a protective model. Agencies operate on a purely transactional model. You provide a clinical service for a 12-hour shift, and they provide a financial transaction.
And that is the entirety of the relationship.
Exactly. The gap is the massive chasm between those two models, and that gap is where the worker completely loses their safety net.
Right. To understand the sheer scale of what workers are giving up, the text does a stark side-by-side comparison. Let's start with basic employment rights.
Okay.
In the protective NHS model, you are operating with full statutory rights, continuous employment protections, and union alignments.
Which is huge.
It is. But if you move into the transactional agency space, you are frequently operating on 0-hours contracts. You have incredibly limited grievance rights. You are, legally speaking, entirely expendable from one shift to the next.
And then you look at long-term financial security, like the pension.
Yeah.
The NHS offers a famously robust, continuous pension scheme designed to secure a worker's retirement after decades of service.
Right.
The agency model. You are usually enrolled in something called a nest pension scheme or a lower-value private alternative. Let's pause there for a second because that's a bit of UK-specific terminology. What exactly is a nest pension?
So NEST stands for National Employment Savings Trust. It's a basic workplace pension scheme set up by the UK government.
Okay.
It is certainly better than nothing, but compared to the compounding value of a dedicated career-long public sector pension, it is a massive downgrade. You're essentially trading long-term wealth building for a short-term bump in your hourly rate.
The trade-offs get even harsher when you look at everyday life events, things like getting sick or starting a family.
Yeah, this is where it really hits home.
If you are a staff member in the NHS and you fall seriously ill, you receive full braid sick pay. If you have a baby, you receive full NHS maternity entitlements. You're basically insulated from financial ruin.
Right.
But in the transactional agency model, you're looking at minimal statutory sick pay. The maternity pay is heavily restricted.
And what's fascinating here is how the source explicitly calls this out as a brutal, entirely false choice that workers have been forced to make for years.
A false choice.
Yes. The prevailing logic has been flexibility or protection, autonomy or security.
Yeah.
You can choose the agency or you can choose the NHS, but the system dictates that you absolutely cannot have both.
And the most terrifying part of this gap, especially for healthcare workers, is the professional liability. The text brings up indemnity and governance support.
Right.
Let me ask you to clarify this. What does variable indemnity coverage actually mean for a nurse or a doctor on the floor?
Well, in medical practice, indemnity is your legal and financial shield against malpractice claims or clinical incidents. If you're a staff member and an incident occurs, the NHS provides centralized coverage. The organizational machinery stands in front of you.
They've got your back.
Exactly. But agencies offer variable indemnity. That means the policy might have significant loopholes, caps, or exclusions.
Yikes.
And furthermore, agencies offer zero governance support. If an inquiry is launched, the agency is not going to send a legal team to help you navigate the tribunal.
No way.
They simply stop offering you shifts. You are entirely alone with the liability.
So if we go back to my rental car analogy, you didn't just rent a car to get flexibility. You rented a car, drove it onto the highway, and suddenly realized you declined the insurance. The airbags have been removed, and if you get into a crash, you have to pay for the other person's medical bills out of your own pocket.
That's exactly it.
The autonomy means absolutely nothing the moment life happens, the moment you get sick, pregnant, or face a professional challenge.
Which brings us to the structural solution presented in the text. The document does not just diagnose this miserable false choice. It introduces a framework designed to destroy it completely.
And this is called NWAF.
Yes, the National Workforce Alignment Framework.
Now, knowing how large institutions operate, my immediate assumption when I hear the word framework is that this is some new HR toolkit, a wellness app, or maybe a mandatory training module that gets emailed around and promptly ignored by everyone.
The text anticipates that exact cynicism. It goes out of its way to clarify what NWAF is not.
Okay.
It is not a policy document gathering dust on a server. It defines NWAF as a retention infrastructure and a national governance instrument.
Hold on, time out. Retention infrastructure and a national governance instrument sounds like corporate word salad designed to put people to sleep.
Fair point.
Let's translate this for the exhausted nurse sitting in their car after a brutal 12-hour shift wondering if they should quit. What does NWAF actually look like to them in practical terms? Is it an app? Is it a contract? How does it function?
Right, so in practical terms, think of NWAF as a hybridized employment platform built directly into the institution.
Okay.
For the worker, it often looks like a digital scheduling interface combined with a revolutionized internal contract. It allows the nurse sitting in their car to log in and select their own shifts, control their own roster, and dictate their own hours with the exact same frictionless ease they would get from an external gig work app.
Oh, wow.
But, and this is the revolutionary mechanism because this infrastructure is governed internally, that nurse never actually leaves NHS employment.
So what does this all mean? It takes the OR and replaces it with an AND.
Precisely. They are getting the absolute best perks of being a freelance gig worker, the autonomy over their daily life, and the ability to breathe. But they maintain the ironclad benefits package, the continuous pension, the paid maternity leave, and the massive legal defense shield of the institutional giant.
They don't have to quit the corporation to get the flexibility.
Ex
So how does implementing this hybridized infrastructure actually fix the burnout to agency pipeline we talked about earlier? The source talks about a chain reaction.
It reverses the flow of the pipeline by addressing the root cause. Remember, the text established that a lack of protection leads to a feeling of vulnerability, which leads to a loss of trust, which ultimately leads to the worker leaving.
Right.
And NWAF interrupts this by functionally guaranteeing protection, by ensuring the worker knows their pension is growing, their indemnity is rock solid, and their sick pay is waiting if they need it. The framework inherently restores trust.
And when trust returns, the staff stay. The allure of the external agency is completely neutralized. I mean, why would you ever accept a 0 hours contract with no sick pay and terrifying legal loopholes if your home organization is finally giving you the scheduling freedom you were desperate for?
You wouldn't. The false choice is eliminated. And the source makes a profound point here. Safety, whether it is legal, financial, or professional, is the ultimate retention tool.
Yeah.
When the system demonstrates that it will stay with the staff during their hardest moments, the staff voluntarily stay with the system.
Which naturally leads to a massive strategic and financial question. If a framework like NWAF is this incredibly effective at keeping staff, why do massive institutions usually focus all their time, energy, and millions of dollars on hiring new people instead?
It's a great question.
We see it constantly. Giant billboards for nursing jobs, expensive television campaigns, massive signing bonuses. It seems like the default setting for any large organization is just to recruit harder.
It is a phenomenal institutional blind spot, and the text attacks it head-on. The document makes a very bold assertion. The NHS and organizations like it do not actually have a recruitment problem. No, they have a retention problem that is entirely rooted in a protection deficit. Focusing on recruitment while ignoring retention is a massive misallocation of capital.
It's like a software company spending millions of dollars on marketing campaigns to get new users to download their app while completely ignoring a massive software bug that causes 50% of their current users to delete the app out of pure frustration every single month.
Exactly.
You aren't growing, you're just frantically trying to outpace your own failure.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize the financial waste. The source contrasts the two approaches very clearly. Traditional recruitment campaigns cost millions of pounds, require constant upkeep, and merely attract interest to fill empty vacancies temporarily.
Right.
NWAF, as a structural mechanism, costs a fraction of that compared to the exorbitant expense of continuous staff turnover and agency fees. Recruitment campaigns bring in bodies. NWAF stabilizes the entire workforce infrastructure.
Because it standardizes protection across the board. It removes the ambiguity that makes people nervous, and crucially, it protects institutional knowledge. When an organization bleeds staff to external agencies, they aren't just losing headcount. They're losing decades of highly specific experience, clinical muscle memory, and the kind of deep system knowledge that you just cannot teach a new recruit in a month.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
This brings us to the most radical claim in the entire document. If we pull back and look at the macro strategy, the text states that NWAF is not designed to compete with external agencies.
Okay.
By removing the trade-off between flexibility and protection, it is designed to replace the need for them entirely.
Wow. It isn't trying to beat the gig economy at its own game. It is attempting to make the gig economy's game obsolete within the healthcare sector.
Because NWAF fundamentally shifts the paradigm. It is not just another workforce initiative or a clever HR trick. It is a comprehensive safety solution.
Yeah.
It acknowledges that autonomy without security is just a form of institutional abandonment.
That is a brilliant way to summarize the entire journey we've taken through this source material today. We started out looking at that classic exit interview scenario. We assumed that healthcare workers and professionals and massive systems everywhere were leaving just to make a quick buck or get better hours.
We accepted the polite cover story.
Exactly. But by digging into the mechanics of this governance analysis, we discovered that they were actually fleeing a profound, terrifying lack of safety. They were driving that rental car without insurance, waiting for the inevitable crash.
Right.
And the moment a structural framework steps in to provide genuine, legal, financial, and professional protection alongside that required flexibility, the exodus stalks.
It proves that people ultimately want to be supported. They want to know the organization has their back rather than just being left to navigate the liabilities on their own when the environment gets chaotic.
So we want to turn this back to you listening right now. Take a moment to look at your own industry, your own department, or even your own career choices over the years. When you see a wave of people rushing for the exit, or when you felt that undeniable urge to leave yourself, are people really just chasing autonomy?
Or are they deep down frantically searching for an environment where they actually feel protected?
Yeah.
And that leads to a much broader, truly fascinating implication that goes far beyond the walls of a hospital.
Oh, absolutely.
We are entering an era where remote work and artificial intelligence are rapidly breaking down traditional employment structures. AI tools are enabling more and more people to become independent contractors, piecing together incomes from multiple sources.
Yeah. It's happening everywhere.
But as we transition into this highly autonomous AI-driven future, are we actually just scaling up this exact protection gap on a global level? Will the ultimate highly coveted luxury of the future workforce not be an espresso machine in the break room or limitless flexibility, but simply a job that actually takes legal and financial responsibility for you?
Something to seriously think about the next time you hear someone say they're leaving for more flexibility. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.